Hi, I'm Dr. Walter Matwichuk, and I'm here to talk to you about some of the lesser known ideas of rational emotive behavior therapy that will help you use this powerful system of ideas to go beyond emotional disturbance and actually self actualize or flourish. Rational emotive behavior therapy, we encourage people to be nonconformist, engage in sensible nonconformity in order to experience their individual interests in the areas of sex, love, marriage, vocation, and recreation. We don't believe one size fits all. So we encourage people to be sensible nonconformists and do their own thing. Now, of course, in order to do this, you're going to need to have what we call unconditional self acceptance. In rational emotive behavior therapy, we teach you how to accept yourself, warts and all, and you can apply this to nonconformity. You can pursue your own interest in the areas of love, work, marriage, recreation, and do this in a way that allows you to enjoy life to the fullest. What works for you may not work for me. And therefore, what you need to do is to experiment, to discover what those recreational outlets may be that make you develop your potential as a human and maximize your pleasure. Now, at the same time, we encourage people to accept ambiguity and acknowledge that there's no such thing as certainty in life. In rational emotive behavior therapy, we encourage you to adopt the perspective that we live in a world of probability, and therefore, you're never going to be sure any experiment you do, any calculated risk you take is going to work to your advantage. That's why it's important to you to have unconditional self-acceptance, because some of the time, even your high probability endeavors will fail. But in REBT, there's no need to fear failure because we train people to see that even when you fail, you're not a failure. Your human worth is not tied to any condition. You can choose to accept yourself even when you fail. And in some instances, there will be failures. It's not always clear what's the right path to take. And therefore, you're going to need to experiment. Now, in rational emotive behavior therapy, we also encourage a great deal of tolerance. We encourage you not only to tolerate yourself with your own flaws and weaknesses, but we also encourage you to apply that same tolerance to other people so that you can live in harmony with them. We live in a social world, and without tolerance, you're going to have a great deal of difficulty living well with your fellow fallible humans. Finally, we're going to encourage you to tolerate that life is hard, difficult, unpredictable, uncertain, unfair, and that you still can have some degree of happiness even when you acknowledge the unfairness and difficulty and unpredictability of life. So tolerance is an idea that we believe really encourages people to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. We also encourage you to accept that your own human animal side, that we are basically humans, that we have our own biological odors and functions, and that there's no need to awfulize about these or be embarrassed by them, that you can unconditionally accept yourself and acknowledge that as an animal, you're going to age, become ill, and eventually die, as will your loved ones. Therefore, you need to really come to terms with the finiteness of life and your own human vulnerabilities that stem from being a limited human who has a limited time on earth. Therefore, you need to be committed to pleasures, what we might call vitally absorbing interests, what I call having a mission in life. And what we're going to encourage people to do is to enjoy activities not as a means to an end, but as an end in and of themselves for the pleasure that they derive from doing them. And therefore, we think that people can flourish and enjoy life maximally by throwing themselves into different endeavors. That means having one or more interests, having a close relationship with one or more people, and by doing so, you will um, maximize pleasure because life is what we believe to be mainly for pleasure and enjoyment and meaning. Life has no real meaning until we give it meaning, and we see it as an opportunity to enjoy yourself rather than use your life as an opportunity to prove your self-worth. So REBT has always encouraged vitally absorbing interests as a way to not only distract yourself from anxiety and other emotions, but also to maximize pleasure. Now, we believe that people are creative problem solvers, that we are natural scientists, and therefore expressing our creativity, experimenting with creating things is a way of flourishing. And so I would encourage you to be aware of your creative side and experiment with it. Try to create new things and experiment with new approaches to problems because you may very well find that you discover a certain amount of pleasure in creating things. And it could be in many different areas of life. It could be in cooking, it could be in writing, it could be in your work, in science. But humans are naturally creative, and therefore you would be well advised to cultivate your creative side. We also encourage people to learn the philosophy of enlightened self-interest. Now, what this means is that you put yourself slightly ahead of all other people. Now, this doesn't mean that you have no regard for their well-being because you live in a world with others, and if you tread on their rights, they will certainly not like that and may very well rebel against it. But that we believe that you take responsibility for your own life and that you therefore you're the best person to protect your own interests and the interests of a few of your loved ones. So you put yourself first, a certain number of people close second, and all others after that. Now, you don't even put the all others, the rest of the world, a distant third, but you have a series of priority interests, and your main interest is to you and to a few close loved ones. We encourage you to be self-directed and self-reliant. REBT is a self-help based psychotherapy. We're teaching you how to help yourself when you become emotionally disturbed, but we want you to go beyond that and be self-directed and pursue your own interests and be self-reliant. So it doesn't mean that you have to do everything by yourself, that you can accept the support that other people may give you, but don't grow dependent upon that support. Remain self-reliant as a means of protecting your own interests and flourishing. REBT encourages a scientific outlook. We believe that absolute truth doesn't exist, and what people need to do is discover, experiment, and use empirically based thinking to figure out what hypotheses work and which ones are false to the observable data. So a scientific outlook is more or less synonymous with the type of thinking that we encourage in REBT. Humans can think scientifically, but they're prone to think in anti-scientific ways. So when a person says to themselves that the world has to be a fair place, there's plenty of scientific data to suggest that that idea is false to the facts. So we'd want you to revise it to an idea like, I would like the world to be a fair place, but it doesn't have to be so. In rational emotive behavior therapy, we encourage what's called semantic precision. What we mean here is that it's fine to generalize, but we caution you about overgeneralizing. And therefore, it's very important that you monitor your language and you precisely think about things. And this is what we train you to do in REBT, but you can do it yourself by observing your tendency to overgeneralize and mislabel people and things. And these kinds of statements can lead you astray from the facts. So, for example, rather than saying that you're a bad person, we could say you did a bad thing. You're just a person who did a bad thing. And that's what we're talking about. But we also can acknowledge that you do other things that may very well be good things. I might say I was rejected today, and it doesn't mean that I'm a reject. So you see here we have a very precise way of thinking about rejection. Language is the building blocks of our thoughts. Our thoughts are expressed largely in language, in words, not exclusively, but largely, often, we talk to ourselves. And what we're trying to do in REBT is help people talk to themselves in a very precise and scientific way. We've already talked about experimenting, but we also want you to be a calculated risk taker. It's very hard to know in advance if something will work when we try it. So we encourage people to adopt the philosophy of calculated risk taking. Now, this doesn't mean that you bet the farm on certain wild guesses or bets. No, they're foolhardy bets. We want you to take calculated risks. Now, this comes in to play when people are thinking about changing careers or changing their path in life. You can't know for certain if it's going to work out for you, but what you need to do is think in advance about the probabilities and data that would support success, and then recognize that if something is sufficiently worthwhile to you, that you would then be willing to take the calculated risk that would be necessary to pursue that interest. So in rational emotive behavior therapy, we'll teach you ideas that will help you have the courage to take calculated risks and experiment, which is probably the best way of figuring out how to increase the pleasure and meaning you derive in life. Speaking of pleasure, we like to encourage you to become a long-term hedonist. What do we mean by that? We mean that we want you to live and have pleasure and meaning both today, but we also want you to maximize it. And that means investing your efforts so that you have pleasure in the long run. And so we want people to have this judicious balance, this sensible balance between spending their money today and investing it for tomorrow, saving it for tomorrow. Same thing with time. We want people to take their time and their energy and not just enjoy it in the moment, but do things that may be a little bit uncomfortable now so that they achieve greater pleasure and meaning in the long run. So in REBT, we make a distinction between short-term hedonism and long-term hedonism. We encourage a philosophy of long-term hedonism. I hope I've shown you some of the ideas that REBT teaches, and that you can learn these ideas by watching me work with people on Saturdays. Each week I do a demonstration. I've done it now for 276 weeks or consecutive weeks or so. It's at 9 a.m. every Saturday morning here in New York City. It's free to attend. It's on Zoom, and about 170 people will attend, and I take a volunteer, and I talk to them about these healthy ideas and these flexible attitudes that REBT teaches in the context of discussing one of their personal problems. And then after about 45 minutes, I take questions, comments, and even criticisms from those watching in the background. Free to attend, but you need the link. So write to me at rebtdoctor@gmail.com. You can also go to my website, rebtdoctor.com. You'll find there lots of lectures, audios, and other writings that I've made available so that you can help yourself to the educational ideas that REBT encourages you to adopt. So please take advantage of my website and please join us on Saturdays at 9 a.m. on Zoom for the Saturday Rational Emotive Behavioral Demonstration. Thank you for your attention, and I hope that you use REBT to promote your own personal happiness and